On this video, I'm going to show you how to do basic operations of addition and subtraction of real numbers. So sometimes it's additions or subtractions that are really simple, like 10 plus 2. Those are the simple ones that we know how to do, right? Or 15 minus 3. But we're going to get into troubles when we introduce some parentheses and some signs in between. Right, so how can we get the correct result every single time? So the first thing that we have to understand, what I'm going to explain, is going to be what we call the rule of signs. And it has to do with having two signs together. Okay, so for example, if you have a situation that looks like minus and inside a parenthesis number, you have to know that the number inside this parenthesis, this magnitude, it has a direction, it has a sign in there. So this 8, if it doesn't have any sign in front of it, we have to assume there is a positive sign in front of it. So this is a situation where I have two signs together. So when you have two signs together, you can merge those two into one only sign by following the next rules. So if you have two signs that are different together, they become negative signs. So you can have these two different situations if there's two signs that are together. So both of those become a negative sign. Or you can also have a situation where you have two negative signs together, or you will see those like this, right? One negative outside, another one inside the parentheses. So when you have two negative signs together or two positive signs together, the result, or you can combine those into one positive sign. So for this situation that I'm showing you here, these two signs are going to combine into, if we follow the rules, they're different signs, so they become a negative 8. So for example, what if I have something like minus negative 8? So what does this transform into? Well, I have to see the two signs that I have in there. If I have two signs that are the same, they're both negative, so then those combine and they become a positive sign. So this is the first thing that we have to understand, how to deal with those multiplication. We call those rule of signs or multiplication of signs. If I have another scenario, something that looks like plus negative 8, so those two signs, since those are two different signs, they're going to combine into a negative sign. So they're going to become a negative sign. The same as if I have something that looks like plus positive 8. So those two signs are the same, so they're going to combine into a positive sign. So these are the rules that we have to understand. If there's two different signs together, then the result is going to be negative. If there's two different signs together, if there's two equal signs together, then the result is going to be positive. So let's see if we can use this to help us do additions and subtractions of real numbers. So for the first situation that we have in here, this is really simple. 10 plus 2. So when you are adding two numbers that have the same sign, in this case that's positive 10 and positive 2, all you have to do is add the magnitudes. So take the numbers, don't worry about the signs, just take the numbers and add them up. So the result is going to be 12, and if they have the same sign, you have to give them the common sign. And this is really simple, right? Positive 10 plus positive 2, or 10 plus 2 is going to be positive 12. Okay, so what happens in this next situation? When I have a subtraction, well, in this case, it looks like a subtraction of 2 minus 5. But that 2 that's in the beginning, it has a positive sign. So if it doesn't have any sign in there, you have to assume there's a positive sign. So can you see, instead of looking at it like 2 minus 5 or positive 2 minus 5, I want you to look at it as positive 2 and negative 5. So this is what we're going to try to look at all of the situations, okay? Negative 5, positive 10. Okay, this or then I'm going to go all the way to the right, positive 15, negative 3. So I want you to think about the numbers from now on like that. Not a minus or not a plus. This is going to, I've seen that this makes people confused a little bit. So let's take a look at the second scenario, the positive 2, negative 5. So those two numbers are together since they have different signs, positive and negative. The result has to come from a subtraction. So I have to take the largest number of those two, either 2 or 5, which is 5, right? 5 is the largest number. And then I have to subtract 2. So you always take the largest number when they have different signs and subtract the smallest number. So that's 5 minus 2. The result is 3. And now the result has to carry over the sign of whichever those two values was larger. So I have a positive 2 and I have a negative 5. So I know 5 is larger, so the result has to carry a negative sign. Okay, so like in the first situation, if they have the same sign, all you have to do is add them up, 10 plus 2, and give them the common sign. If they have different signs, then you have to subtract them, the largest minus the smallest, so 5 minus 2, and then the result carries over the sign of whichever number was larger. So the result has to be negative 3. Let's see if we can apply the same rule for the next example. That's a negative 5 plus 10, so, or negative 5 positive 10. So those two numbers have different signs, right? That's a negative 5 and a positive 10. So the rule says I have to subtract the largest from the smallest. So the largest number is 10, and then I'm going to subtract the smallest number. So the result, the magnitude of the numerical value is going to be 5. And now what's going to be the sign of this result? Go back at the beginning. Let's look at the numbers. I have a negative 5 and I have a positive 10. So it has to carry over the sign of whichever number is larger. So in this case, the result is going to carry over the positive sign. So the result is positive 5. Okay, negative 5 plus 10, or negative 5 positive 10. If you add those two numbers, the result is positive 5. Now let's see if we can apply the rules of signs for the next example. Okay, why am I applying the rules of signs? Because on the second number over here, I have two signs that are together. And this happens when you have a parenthesis. You always have two signs together. So the first thing that you have to do is try to remove the parentheses, or try to remove those two signs, that negative sign that's in front of the parenthesis and the sign that's inside the parenthesis, and combine them into one only sign using one of these two rules. Right? If they're different signs, then they become a negative. If they're equal signs, then they become a positive sign. So before we start doing subtractions or additions into this operation, let's go ahead and get rid of the parentheses. So negative 7, and then the two signs that I have in here, just the signs. It looks like I have a negative sign outside and I have a positive sign inside. That's a positive 5. So since those two numbers are, since those two signs are different, then the result is going to be negative. Right? Those two signs become a negative sign, and that's a 5. So we get rid of the parentheses, and now we're left with a situation with two numbers. Just two real numbers, that's a negative 7, and that is a negative 5. So this is going to be quite similar to the first example, the positive 10, positive 2 example, because those are two numbers that have the same sign. So the same rule applies, right? To two numbers that have the same sign, I have to add the magnitudes. So negative 7 and negative 5, I have to add those two numbers, which is 7 plus 5, and the result is going to be 12. And I have to give them the common sign. I have to give them the common sign. On the top example, I did the same thing. They have the same sign, so positive 10 and positive 2. I add them up, 10 and 2, that's 12, and I give them the common sign. The same happens on this example. Negative 7, negative 5, they have the same sign, so I have to add them up, 7 plus 5, and then give them the common sign, which is a negative sign. So for the next example, on the top right, that is a positive 8 minus negative 10. So again, I have a situation where I have two signs together. Before you start doing additions or subtraction, you have to get rid of those two signs that are together because I have a parenthesis. So since I have two numbers that, or two signs that are equal, they're both negative signs, the rule says that two signs that are equal, if they are together, that becomes a positive sign. So this operation in reality is going to be positive 8 plus 10. And now I have a positive 8 and a positive 10, two numbers with the same sign. So the rule says I have to add them up. So I add them up, 8 plus 10, that's 18, and I give them the common sign. So the result in this case is positive 12. So first, you have to get rid of the parentheses, get rid of those two signs that are together, and then you can apply the rules of addition and subtraction. So if they have the same sign, you add them up, give them the common sign. If they have different signs, you do a subtraction, and then you give them the sign of the largest. So for this next situation, this is really simple, right? That's a positive 15 -3, so they have different signs. If we apply the same rule, right, if they have different signs, the rule says I have to take the largest and I have to subtract the smallest. So 15 minus 3, that's going to be 12. And I have to give them the sign of the largest. So I have a positive 15 and I have a -3, so of course the result is going to be positive 12. And this is really simple, just to show you that the rules apply the same for every operation. So positive 15 minus 3, that's positive 12. Or 15 minus 3, that's 12, it's the same thing. For the next example, let's see what we have in here. So 2 plus -3. The first thing that I can see is that I have two signs in there together, so I can combine these two into one only operation. So I have two signs that are different signs. The result has to be, or they transform into a negative sign. Those two signs become a negative sign. So now it looks like I have a subtraction, 2 minus 3. This 2 is a positive 2. So those are two numbers with different signs. So the rule says I have to subtract the largest from the smallest. So I have to take 3 and subtract 2, the largest number minus the smallest number. The result is going to be 1. And now this has to carry over the sign of whichever those two numbers is larger. So in this case, I have positive 2 and I have -3. So 3 is larger, so the result has to carry over a negative sign. So the result is -1. For the last example, I have -10 plus -30. So the first thing that I see here is that I have two signs that are together. So I have to do this transformation before I start adding and subtracting. So -10, those two signs are different. So that means that they're going to combine into a negative sign. And just leave the magnitude as it is. So a positive and a negative, they combine into a negative sign. Okay, now at this point, it looks like I have two negative numbers. I have -10 and I have -30. So the rule is if I have two numbers that have the same sign, I have to add them up. So 10 plus 30, the result is going to be 40. And then I have to give them the common sign. So the common sign is negative. And this should be my final result for this example.